Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning, Dr. Rubin. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rufai. Thank you so much. It feels great to be back. I did truly miss you all, actually. So I'm actually very, very happy. You know, when you're not feeling too strong, I always say, well, my mom actually always says, like, oh, I'm strong, dear. Don't want to say that, you like. But I'm very, very happy that feeling much better. I'm back. Let me tell you what's happening around the world. Now, Russia has agreed to a partial ceasefire on targeting Ukrainian energy infrastructure for the next 30 days. This is after Vladimir Putin and US President Donald Trump spoke over the phone for about 90 minutes. Now, what you're seeing now is some archive pictures from 2018, but they did speak on the phone for nearly 2 hours. Now, essentially, this comprehensive month-long ceasefire is what they were discussing, and that is obviously the deal that Trump's team had recently worked out with the Ukrainians in Saudi Arabia. Now, Putin said that this comprehensive truce could only work if foreign military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine came to an end. Now, Ukraine's European allies have previously rejected such conditions. Now, to be clear, this move is a rejection of that month-long ceasefire that Trump's team did work out with the other side in Saudi Arabia earlier on this month. Now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, he wasn't too impressed. He said that any future talks without Ukraine will not yield any results. Be really interested to hear your thoughts. But let's move on to the Middle East now. And Israel has resumed combat in full force. Those were the words from Benjamin Netanyahu. This is, of course, against Hamas in the Gaza Strip as they continue to kill people. More than 400 people were killed in the heaviest wave of airstrikes since the ceasefire began on the 19th of January. UN Chief Antonio Guterres says that he is outraged by the Israeli airstrikes in Gaza, joining a chorus of international condemnation. As we've said, more than 400 Palestinians have been killed, including many women and children. 14 Palestinians were also killed overnight as Israel attacks southern Gazan positions in Khan Yunus and Rafah. Now, this ceasefire agreement was thrown into uncertainty when the United States and Israel wanted to change the terms of the deal to essentially extend stage one, which would see more hostages released. That would have delayed, obviously, the start of phase two, which was actually meant to establish a permanent ceasefire and required Israeli troops to pull out of Gaza. But Hamas rejected this proposed change to the agreement, saying that essentially what has been broken by the United States, Qatar and Egypt is unacceptable at this point. So it is very, very disheartening to essentially take one step towards peace, and now we're taking a few steps back. You know, when we were looking at this ceasefire, it was, of course, across a few stages, 3 to 4 stages. And in order for us to get to, the world to get to stage 2, that would be quite significant because it would be the confirmation of a permanent ceasefire, really moving towards peace. So unfortunately, we're seeing the world kind of cascade back into chaos, and it's very disheartening to see.
Very disheartening to see, but like I said before, it will be delusional to think that America will be able to control Israel in a ceasefire against Gaza. Femi, I insist, no ceasefire happened. Some people say I should say patchy ceasefire. There's nothing called patchy ceasefire. A ceasefire is a ceasefire. What is a ceasefire? Seize and fire. Stop fighting. During this ceasefire, what happened? Israel was still attacking.
Yes.
So there was no ceasefire. Israel had violated the ceasefire long ago. When they had gotten their prisoner swap game to a certain extent, they decided to unleash fully. And guess why he's also doing it, Netanyahu? He also wants to appeal to his very strong right-wing base because he's also facing his internal struggles. The courts are against him for going against Mr. Barr, the Shin Bet chief that is trying to investigate him and his cabinet members for collecting money from Qatar. So when he looks at the situation of things that doesn't face him, he throws in this Molotov again. Then starts, so the attention and the attraction will be on the fighting. America can never be an independent arbiter in bringing peace to this region. Moving to Putin. Femi, there's a doll in Russia called the Matryoshka. People buy it as souvenir.
Yes, like
It's
those kind of
a
like
play
ones.
doll.
Yes,
It's called the
plenty of them in
Matryoshka.
one. Yes.
In my mind, Donald J. Trump has become the Matryoshka. We said it before, that Putin will play you. Everybody thought we were joking. But today, Trump has become the Matryoshka. Because what Putin said invariably is, we will only cease fire on attacks to... Please, I need some time, please. This invasion in my thought process kills me. We would only cease fire on attacks to facilities, oil facilities, which has been the greatest strength of Ukraine. And Ukraine had been attacking oil facilities in Russia. But you will continue fighting and continue
Everywhere
to killing citizens and all of that. This is not what Trump wanted. So it has shown that in the argument that lasted over 90 minutes, Putin did play Trump, and Trump was the Matryoshka. So Putin will continue in this dynamic way until he gets the upper hand. And all of this is buying time. He will get back the Kursk region that was invaded by Ukraine totally, and he will continue to push.
Thank you,
so a tale of two ceasefire deals, one in Russia and one in Israel. If we're to go by what's happened in Israel, between Israel and Hamas, or the Gaza Strip, then we would say that it doesn't look too well in terms of America coming in to mediate between Russia and Ukraine. And we're already seeing the signs already. But let me talk about Israel, as a result of the fact that this is a continuation of what happened yesterday. Yeah. Yesterday, when the news broke, only tens of people had been killed by renewed airstrikes following a breakdown in the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. Now, what they've said, according to Israel, and I mentioned this yesterday, is that they had gotten intelligence that Hamas was regrouping to perhaps launch another attack. But very importantly is that they talked around the fact that Netanyahu probably didn't even want to get into the second phase, which you highlighted when you were speaking, which would have begun the process to a definitive end to this war that's lasted, for since 2023. Now, that's one. The second part is also looking at domestic issues around Netanyahu himself, using this as a distraction because he himself is facing corruption charges in Israel. Now, he's saying that he's unable to appear before the courts because of the fact that they are now going back into a war. And what's happened in the last few days is said to just be a microcosm of what's supposed to happen in the next few days, as they're saying that it's the beginning of broader attacks on Gaza, on the Gaza Strip, on Palestinians, on Hamas. Like I mentioned yesterday, from the very beginning, Netanyahu's plan for this war was to decimate Hamas and to completely annihilate them. And until perhaps he sees that happen, a ceasefire deal will just be on the surface, and he will continue to violate the terms. It's important to know that he had asked for an extension of the first phase of the ceasefire deal, which was supposed to be for an initial 30 days, moving to 60 days to, promote the exchange of hostages and prisoners from both sides of the divide. Unfortunately, he's seemed to consistently not been able to adhere to the terms of the ceasefire deal. And Hamas themselves have said they are not willing to go another 30 days further. And you can understand why. There was a breath of relief. A lot of losses as a result of a lot of losses as a result of the attacks on Gaza, and it was a relief. We saw the rejoicing on the streets when ceasefire deal was announced. So it's just so sad to see that we were on the precipice of a peace deal, and now it has all come to nothing as a result of Israel's action.
Okay, what are the basic issues about the renewal of onslaught against Gaza and Hamas by Israel? On January 9, there was this ceasefire deal that was brokered by the United States. Under that ceasefire deal, 30 hostages, Israeli hostages, were released. 8 corpses. The Israelis released 1,500 Palestinian prisoners of war. Now, and there was a cessation of hostilities during that window, the 6 weeks window. Now the Americans came back and said, look, there should be a second phase of the ceasefire. Now, what has caused this latest onslaught is the fundamental difference or differences between Israel and Hamas as to how the second phase should proceed. You recall, I think last week, there was a Qatar, Jordan brokered meeting. Yes. And the main issue was the disagreement. The Middle East envoy was there. Simon Witkoff, that's his name. He was there, but they could not reach an agreement. Now, Hamas is saying that we want a complete cessation of hostilities. But Israel is saying that we want more hostages to be released. There are still 59 Israeli hostages in the hands of the Hamas. And Hamas says we want complete cessation of hostilities. Israel is saying, we want all our hostages to be released. That is the difference. And that is why Israel is bombing, the Gaza Strip, because Netanyahu is also under pressure from the families of the hostages who are saying, look, you can't release some, and some will not be released. Is Israel a fair habitat? Is U.S., a good habitat in this? I think Israel itself is biased. Let's keep using that word, because that's the biggest word in Nigeria today. Because the UN representative,
US is biased.
The US representative, Cheza, I think that's her name, Doris Cheza, is saying that, the Hamas people are the problem because they don't want to release hostages. So it's unfortunate that we have an escalation of conflict in that part of the world.
Yes.
Now, quickly, let me go to the 90 minutes phone call between Putin and President Trump. It simply means that Putin had said that there will be ceasefire only on his own terms. And I think he got away with it.
Yeah, he is the person who went away from the conversation with the upper hand.
It was a frank talk, phone call. And he has made it clear to the Americans that, one, you cannot continue to give military aid to Ukraine. And two, Ukraine cannot continue to regroup. Okay. Otherwise, the 30-day ceasefire will not take place. And I think that is what is clear. However, in diplomacy, you don't disgrace the other party. They just had some face-saving thing by saying, okay, energy infrastructure, there will be a 30-day ceasefire. Both parties should not attack each other's infrastructure. And then, of course, Zelensky is saying, well, this is an indication that these people are not ready for peace. And he doesn't believe it. The Ukrainians do not believe in this idea of the ceasefire. So that's the main thing there.
Agreed.
But the other part of it is the discussion about the Middle East, about the Black Sea,
yes,
and how President Trump, the Americans were pushing, for further negotiations on how to secure lasting peace in the Middle East. Two different readouts. In the readout by the Russians, they didn't even mention that. But the readout from the White House mentioned also the Middle East side of it. But I don't think that they've gotten closer to peace in that particular region. But they did a diplomatic face-saving thing.
They need to put you
the only
in the
hope
negotiation
here,
table.
The only hope here is that
move on.
discussions, we've been told,
yes,
will continue.
All righty. Well, thank you all for your thoughts. Let's move on to the front covers of our newspapers. As ever, we begin here in Nigeria with the front page of This Day. And This Day has a special feature celebrating Women's Month. Arise News is honouring the women making an impact, including global leaders and policymakers, such as Senator Oluremi Tinubu, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Director General of the World Trade Organization. Also have Justice Kudirat Kekereekun and Amina Mohammed, the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. If you look at page 39 of today's edition of This Day, it will show an extended list of honorees alongside every other issue that we're taking when we're looking at Women's Month. So really great write-up there. But in addition to that, of course, we know that This Day joins a whole host of other Nigerian papers in our stack this morning, which of course leads with the 6-month suspension of River State Governor Simi Fubara. His deputy as well has also been suspended, Ngozi Odu, and as well as all elected members of the Rivers House of Assembly. And this is as the president declared a state of emergency in the state following the swelling political crisis taking place in Rivers. It is also worth noting that Nyesom Wike was not suspended or hasn't really been mentioned. There's that. Moving on to the New Telegraph, and of course Governor Fubara's whereabouts remain unknown. And it does say on the front page of the New Telegraph that this is, of course, off the back of this declaration of a state of emergency. It's not clear where the governor is, whether he's at Government House or elsewhere. The Punch wades into this crisis, of course, in Rivers State with its headline that soldiers and tanks have now moved into Government House. Also, as we can see from the picture headline story, Libya on Tuesday actually deported 177 migrants, Nigerian migrants, mostly women, as part of a voluntary repatriation program as part of the country's illegal migration control department. To The Guardian now, and lest we forget the pipeline explosions which have taken place in Rivers State. It's believed that they will cause a daily loss of $35 million. In all of the major shifts taking place since the President's declaration on Tuesday evening, as we can see on the front page of the Daily Trust, some lawyers believe that Tinubu has made a mistake, that the suspension of an executive figure who was democratically elected may be considered unconstitutional. Finally, the Daily Sun, which also leads on this Rivers State crisis, also features a story on the flagging off of urban roads in Enugu State, 141 of them by Governor Pete Umba. To the United Kingdom now, and as we can see on the front page of the Daily Express, Prime Minister Keir Starmer has reiterated his position, and clearly that of the rest of Europe, which is that Ukraine is who they are defending, and Ukraine must have a just and lasting peace. Those are your papers from around the world this morning.
Well, thank you very much, Adefemi, for taking us through the newspaper headlines from front pages around the world. Hope to see you again tomorrow for World Brief and newspaper headlines. Thank you.